que diga lo que diga, yo soy libre de pensar, porque siento que es la hora de ganar la libertad. Hasta cuando ya de abusos es el tiempo de cambiar, porque basta de miseria, voy a decir que no.
Porque nace el arco iris después de la tempestad, porque quiero que florezcan mil maneras de pensar, porque sin la dictadura la alegría va a llegar, porque pienso en el futuro, voy a decir que no.
Vamos a decir que no, oh.
Con la fuerza de mi voz.
Vamos a decir que no, oh.
Yo lo canto sin temor.
Vamos a decir que no, oh.
Todos juntos a triunfar.
Vamos a decir que no.
Por la vida y por la paz.
Terminemos con la muerte, es la oportunidad.
Debe ser a la violencia.
We are back in the South Pacific on board the Marco Polo. As we have crossed the ocean, we have met people on all the islands. A few weeks ago, we told you about the early voyages of the Polynesians. We explained how they navigated and how they found every speck of land, even the smallest and most unsuitable little island. But what do we know about the early life of these people? What did they do when not sailing between the islands? What did they eat? What did they believe in? And how was their society organized? Many facts about all this have been lost forever due to ignorance of the first explorers and missionaries. The Europeans brought diseases which killed off whole islands, whereby the culture of the island also disappeared. The missionaries banned traditional clothing, dancing, songs, and destroyed old temples, monuments, and artifacts. And the islanders themselves, eager to please their new white-skinned masters, did the rest of the job themselves. In many, many islands, literally nothing is left from ancient times. Anyway, it is still possible to tell about life in ancient times, and today we'll go around on the islands to study this. Our first stop is at Mangariba Island, in the forest at the foot of Mount Duff. Here, together with our friend Dominique, we inspect an immense stone.
Eh bien, c'est une grande roche d'origine volcanique qui vient probablement du Mont Duff, qui est juste là,
ouais.
Qui fait plusieurs tonnes, plusieurs dizaines de tonnes probablement. Et à son sommet, nous avons eu la curiosité de voir que ça a été taillé de cette forme-là, et nous ne comprenons pas à quoi ça peut servir. Et quelques personnes pensent que c'est une genre de piscine ou de baignoire,
ah ouais?
Probablement pour une princesse ou une reine. Peut-être que c'est autre chose, nous ne savons pas. Cette roche a été taillée. Nous pouvons voir environ.
Est-ce qu'il y a la même profondeur de tout ça?
Oui. Il y a à peu près 25-30 cm, presque un pied, partout. C'est bien taillé.
Ouais.
Et nous pouvons observer ici, au milieu, un trou plus profond.
Ah.
Qui est presque 60 cm.
Ouais.
Nous pensons peut-être que c'est un trou pour mettre un poteau,
ouais.
Pour recouvrir,
ouais.
Pour le soleil.
Ouais.
Parce que ici, avant, il n'y avait pas d'arbres.
Ah.
Ok, ben maintenant, nous allons vider ce trou,
ouais.
Cette baignoire, pour voir vraiment quelle dimension, qu'est-ce que c'est exactement.
Bon, pour voir.
Et voilà.
Ah,
Ça y est, il n'y a plus d'eau.
non, c'est bon.
Maintenant, nous pouvons nous rendre compte qu'il y a bien presque un pied.
Oui.
Et ici, il y a le trou qui fait aussi probablement un pied aussi.
Ouais.
Voilà.
Et c'est bien fait.
Très très bien taillé.
Ouais.
Très bien taillé. Et nous pouvons voir que c'est bien plat. C'est au bon niveau.
Ouais.
C'est du très bon travail. Aujourd'hui, c'est même avec les appareils modernes, c'est difficile
Ouais.
de bien faire.
Mais ça a été utile de pierre ou de métal?
Eh bien, je pense que c'est de pierre, parce que si c'est de métal, nous verrons les traces.
Ah.
Avec le burin,
Ouais.
les outils en fer,
Ouais.
nous pouvons voir les traces. Mais là, il n'y a pas de traces.
Est-ce qu'il y a été utile de métal dans les anciennes Polynésie?
Non, avant l'époque des missionnaires, il n'y avait pas d'outils en métaux, hein, il n'y en avait pas.
Uh-huh.
This bathtub was apparently made with stone tools. On the island of Tubuai in southern Polynesia, we asked Lawrence Miller to explain how far the Polynesians got in terms of developing the stone tools.
Well, there's certainly, I think this is, I want to stress this point, that in Tubuai we have a highly evolved, a highly advanced school of tools where a few of the pieces are very, very unique and very much better made than you'll find almost anywhere else, certainly anywhere else in the world, because Polynesian tools are by far the most diversified in terms of stone tools. But in terms of Polynesia, a piece, for instance, of this quality, where they've gone even to the trouble to finish the end, where they've left no detail, and this piece actually broke before it was finished because there's no polishing. This is in the initial stages, and it's already more perfect than 99% of the rest of the tools in the Pacific. That indicates that here we have perhaps a master craftsman at work, and that a lot of the tools, while the bulk of the tools are really roughly made.
This was found in Tahiti on the surface, and typical adze shape. Then this is typical axe shape, symmetric, both sides the same angle. This one is one side flat and one side curved.
What's it called, this?
This is an axe.
Yeah.
That's an adze.
Here. I know.
In Mangareva, I think they call this tuki.
En realidad, en Pueblo Pascuense, en su comienzo, llegaron con material de trabajos. Como usted puede ver, esta herramienta llamada toki son para tallar. Con esta herramienta fueron tallados los grandes moai o monumentos que hay alrededor de la isla, también puesto en los ajus. Al mismo tiempo, esto también servía para escarbar la tierra y plantar. El pueblo pascuense entonces al principio era un pueblo laboral que solamente se preocupaban en aumentar la vida humana.
This is a very recent, chronologically recent tool in terms of its style. This piece, when you see how well it's been made, specifically in here, it's been completely pecked. The shoulder's very high, it's an exaggerated shoulder, and this tool is probably very similar to any one of these crude tools. So you have to ask the question, why would they have gone to all this trouble to make this piece when another tool, a very similar crude tool, for instance this one, which is quickly made, will do the same job.
Yeah. Why do you think they did it?
Well, I think it's partly, as we said, perhaps a special school of craftsmen who are more interested in perfecting, in producing the perfect object, because a lot of this part of the tool is never even seen. That's covered by lashing. That means they don't really have to do anything there.
No.
But why? They continued. They finished that piece here and here. They've gone to all that trouble, and I think it represents perhaps something that borders more on a philosophical concept. Why bother? Why do more than you should?
Hasta cuando de repente aparece una nueva herramienta,
¿Sí?
un nuevo arma que se llamó matá. Matá es esta obsidiana que usted puede ver en mi mano,
Sí.
que coincide con la palabra en castellano matar, quiere decir exterminar la persona.
Sí.
Este es un arma cortante que se usó para la guerra.
Sí.
O sea, después de una época floreciente de trabajos, de siembra, de hacer grandes obras, vino el tiempo de la destrucción, de la guerra. Entonces cambió el toqui y el acaúe, que son para levantar la tierra para plantar, por un nuevo arma que se llamó matá, para destruir a las personas.
How long time would you think it would take to
make
To
one?
make one?
Everyone asks me this question. There's been a few, very few ethnographic observations where they've actually watched somebody make it. I think that the actual in the early phases, it didn't take them very long at all, because the rough work, if you like, was really all that was done. Just the basic chipping, I doubt whether that would have taken more than an hour. You could only hit it and it breaks, and that's all.
Yeah.
Then they would grind this thing, and the grinding is minimum. This is one of the very, very early tools. And I wouldn't think that it took them more than, it didn't take them a day to finish that. But on the other hand, probably all the hammering that's involved in this, you're talking about a much, much longer process. Here, the actual physical hammering of the object, physical blows, might be 300 blows. Here you're talking about maybe 10,000 to achieve that kind of surface. And that's certainly a time-oriented issue.
Yeah.
Nous pouvons voir que ce n'est pas terminé. Probablement que ça c'est, ils ont essayé de travailler pour que ça donne une forme, mais ce n'est pas terminé. Et ici nous avons encore une autre sorte de roche qui est différente de celle-là, peut-être presque la même chose que ça. Et là aussi ce n'est pas bien terminé, ou alors c'est terminé mais peut-être que ça a beaucoup servi.
What we don't really know, what we're only guessing about, is the mentality, the actual mind behind the process.
That's right.
In many of their chants, you can see that they chanted. They had a kind of repetitive, and it reminds me much of modern hypnosis and hypnosis, if you like, where you suggest to yourself something, and after a while you believe it. And I think that's the same process, is that you keep chanting, you keep doing the same thing over and over. Each day I'm getting better and better, and inevitably they did produce something rather miraculous. I think I've showed you a few tools here where the work represents something you can't believe it. That it was done without a machine is really something.
That's really...
even that small one beside you there, the very small one at the end, that one, when you see the quality of the work in such a small piece, you think, they had to have a grinder or something to make that. And in fact, there's no machines, there's no tools, there's no metal. This was rock on rock. knocking two stones together, you're going to produce that. And I think very few people can really conceive how, because that's the key, is do it yourself. Try to take two stones and knock them together, and they break every time the wrong way. And I think that's you know, I've tried, and it really shows you that it's some of these things are literally miracles in themselves.
Now, another thing is that everybody believes that the islanders were isolated for, let's say, 1,000 years in Easter Island. I don't believe so, because in Pitcairn Island you find stone fishhooks, and the only other place you find stone fishhooks is in Easter Island, and they are exactly the same. You place two, one next to the other one, you will never know the difference.
Tengo aquí en mi mano los mangay. Es un anzuelo para pescar atún o para pescar peces grandes.
Sí, bien grande.
De que crearon esto al principio, pero resulta que el pez más grande, la piedra se quiebra. Entonces inventaron, buscaron hueso de seres humanos, hicieron un mangay de hueso que es mucho más firme. Especialmente sacada de la tibia, del hueso de la tibia y del hueso de la mano.
Sí.
Entonces el hueso más firme para hacer mangay.
That is for trolling the bonito, for the pelagic fish, bonito or tuna. And it's two pieces. This is the hinge part of the mother of pearl shell that they cut out, drilled through here with whatever to attach for the line, for the fishing line. And then this piece here is separate and tied on with sennet.
Oh yeah, coconut fiber.
Coconut fiber line, yeah. And of course at one time there was some feather here, which is what's left here. And that looks like burro. Burro. It's a kind of a hibiscus, a wild hibiscus, a tree. And that's the inner bark of the burro. It looks like burro bark, and it probably came out as the feather.
And where did you find that one?
This one was found in the Marquesas. This came through my mother's father.
I see.
From her side of the family. He was quite a collector of these things too. This came from the Marquesas.
¿Tenía algún tipo de cordel para
Claro,
este? ¿Qué
claro.
tipo de cordel tenían?
En la isla todavía hay árboles de jau-jau. Entonces su corteza, al secarlo, se produce, digamos, una especie de hilo y con eso trenzada para pescar, para amarrar. Acuérdese que en Pascua dice que existió, digamos, cordel mucho más grande para levantar cosas pesadas. Y precisamente eso es del jau-jau. Así que eso hasta la actualidad todavía se puede hacer lienza o hilo o línea para pescar atún, digamos, con jau-jau. Pero sale más fácil comprar nylon, se evita mucho trabajo.
Sí.
Hay cosas más modernas.
Sí, claro.
Y la ventaja que tiene el nylon es que en el agua es invisible. No se ve, entonces el pescado pica el anzuelo.
Claro.
Entonces ya hay otro anzuelo más chico, con carne, se tapa. Y posiblemente el atún en ese tiempo era mucho más tonto. Comía cualquier cosa, pero en este momento hasta los peces son inteligentes, ahora piensan, ven las cosas y saben lo que es para matar y se arrancan.
Now we are on the island of Raivavai in Austral Islands in French Polynesia. And what we see here is a marae. A marae was the ancient form of temple for the Polynesians. And as we can see, it's several surroundings of huge stones that makes the marae. And the marae was used for meetings and as a temple. And they, in a part of this marae, they made human sacrifices. When the Christian missionaries arrived to the Polynesian islands about 200 years ago, the Polynesians, they took up Christianity and they left the maraes. Some was destroyed, this was just left and have been left for the nature in 200 years, and this has been restored lately.
In 1987, we went to Raivavai and we started carrying out an archaeological survey. And what we did is we didn't have sufficient time to do the whole island. We just divided it in two according to the high ridges. And we took one of the ancient craters. And then we started dividing it into small quadrangles according to photographs that we had of maps. And then we just started crisscrossing, separated 1 meter each worker, up and downhill, up and down to the ridge, all the way to the coast. And everything that we found that was an archaeological site, we would map it, and then we draw it at 1/500. And these are, well, a map of one area of the coast. And then every site here you can see, well, maraes or other structures. But what we found principally is that the ancient settlement pattern is similar, and it applies to practically all the Austral islands. And that is that by the volcanic formation you have a center cone, and that's sometimes very abrupt, like in the case of Raivavai, and you have a lot of erosion. Now all this erosion goes down, all the soil, and it accumulates at the foot of the talus here, and then there you have sort of an area, a swampy area, that is very good for growing taro. And then after that you have sort of a small sandy part between that separates it from the ocean and from the lagoon. Now the people couldn't live close to the coast because all the water that arrives to the coast has already passed by the swamp. So it's dirty water, not good for drinking, so there was nobody living on the coast. So what they would do, they would have the swamp, and then just inside from the swamp they would have their houses. And this were at the foot of the cliff, a little bit higher, so you had a view of the lagoon. You could see what was going on down on the swamp and new plantations. And at the same time it would be a little bit fresher because you would get the wind that starts hitting the foot of the hill and goes up in the evenings. And so the whole settlement pattern is that, of the whole island. It goes all the way exactly the same around. And in some areas where you have little streams that come down, then they would put little walls inside to make sort of steps, so the water, when it went down, wouldn't go too fast and wouldn't erode the waterbed. At the same time, sometimes it would divest water to agricultural terraces that were close by.
I see.
Various places around the Raivavai we find these marais situated, and some are smaller, some are very big. And each one of them have belonged to a tribe or family, and they have been used only for that family or tribe. If a member from another family accidentally should enter a marai, there would be the possibility of that person becoming seriously ill. And to release that illness, it was necessary to speak with the chief of the marai from the family it belongs to. But now most of the marais are destroyed and left to the nature. But this one have been renovated and has been more or less like this in the old days.
We recorded about 176 marais, and we have about 700 and something sites on 50% of the island. And that report should be published between here and the end of the year.
I see. And for an amount of marais like this, how would you estimate, if you can do that, the population, how many people were living there?
I wouldn't know, because we don't know if the marais are contemporary, one was the others. And besides that, sometimes you would have people that would have several marais, because the marais were ceremonial structures, and you had sometimes specific marais. You would have marais that were they would belong to a family. It would be the lineage where you would bury the people of that lineage. You would have marais that were dedicated for agriculture, or the garden agriculture, or for fishing, or marais for fishermen. You would have shrines, and it's very difficult to sort of separate what is a shrine and what is a marae in this island, because unfortunately all the oral tradition was lost.
C'est un lieu de culte. C'est un lieu où il y avait des cérémonies religieuses. C'est pour donner une image, c'est exactement la même chose comme aujourd'hui les églises ou les temples.
Well, in general, maraes and these uprights you find inside were places where deified ancestors or different gods would reincarnate during specific ceremonies that were carried out during the year. And they had, like everybody has, the calendar of annual events. Like, let's say, in such a month, in the months of January, you would go and catch turtle, or then in the months of February, you would plant bananas and plant this, and then in the months of June, you would have to harvest this. And all this was set according to, usually at least in Easter Island and in the Marquesas, by the position of certain stars during different times of the year, and the position of the moon during those, between those periods. And every time that you had something like that, a ceremony had to be carried out at the marae. So the marae was a center of where the community would gather for specific ceremonies, where initiation ceremonies would be carried out, where burial would take place. I mean, everything important was sort of passed through the marae, and there were different types of maraes for different things.
The islanders brought plants and some animals with them on their migrations over the ocean. Dominique took us to a big man-made hole to show us how they kept their food throughout the year.
Alors, ces trous servaient à stocker la pâte du fruit à pain. Lorsque la saison des fruits à pain arrive, normalement 2 fois dans l'année, il est nécessaire de recueillir tous les fruits, ne pas laisser pourrir les fruits, parce que c'est l'aliment de base de toute la population. Alors, toute la population se met par équipe pour cueillir tous les fruits à pain sur les arbres, ensuite les éplucher et ensuite les stocker dans ce genre de trous. C'est comme un silo. Alors, on met d'abord quelques feuilles de banane pour assurer l'étanchéité. Il ne faut pas que l'air pénètre à l'intérieur de la pâte. Et ce trou donc peut servir pour nourrir plusieurs centaines de personnes.
Oui, parce que c'est grand. Combien de mètres de diamètre c'est ça?
Oh, exactement, je ne sais pas, mais probablement au moins 4 mètres peut-être, ou 5 mètres même plus. Et la profondeur, c'est aux environs de 2 mètres. Hein. Bon, la seule agriculture, celle que tout le monde, celle qui était la plus importante, c'était la culture des arbres de fruits à pain. C'était vraiment l'essentiel. Maintenant, il y avait des bananiers. Il y avait, avant l'arrivée des missionnaires, il n'y avait pas beaucoup de choses. Il y avait le taro, mais il n'y avait pas le manioc. Le manioc est arrivé bien plus tard, après l'arrivée des missionnaires aussi, et beaucoup d'autres arbres aussi. Alors, c'est bien qu'il n'y avait finalement pas beaucoup de choses. Le popoy se mangeait avec le poisson ou comme ça. S'il n'y avait pas de poisson, c'était le popoy tout seul.
C'est-à-dire que les gens d'avant les missionnaires n'avaient pas une agriculture organisée comme nous connaissons l'agriculture qu'on est organisée avec les champs et tout ça. Seulement les arbres des fruits à pain.
Oui, voilà. Et c'était très important. Il y avait des lois très strictes sur le fruit à pain parce que c'était vraiment le seul arbre qui donnait le fruit, donc la vie. C'était si dans ton jardin ou à côté de ta maison, tu avais 2, 3 arbres de fruits à pain, ça représentait la vie pour toi parce que en ces temps-là, c'était très difficile de trouver de la nourriture. Effectivement, il n'y avait pas d'agriculture, il n'y avait pas d'élevage. Les gens pêchaient le poisson et à la saison donc des fruits à pain, ils stockaient le fruit à pain. Ils avaient une technique bien au point pour la pêche au poisson, plusieurs techniques, mais ils connaissaient parfaitement la nature, parfaitement le poisson. Ils pouvaient partir maintenant et il dit dans 2 heures je reviens avec tel poisson, combien de poissons, parce qu'il sait quand est-ce que le poisson va passer à tel endroit bien précisément. Aujourd'hui, nous ne savons pas tout ça parce que les gens n'ont plus le temps d'observer. Il n'y a plus assez de temps. Mais c'est vrai qu'il n'y avait pas beaucoup d'agriculture et il n'y avait pas d'élevage, pas du tout d'élevage.
Bathtub, stone tools, temple sites and food conservation, all of it says a bit about the life in ancient times. The Polynesians not only managed to find and populate the islands, they also maintained a civilization. Since metals were not available or known, they developed the world's finest stone tools. They adapted their originally Asian crops to another climate, another type of soil, and they understood how to stock the food for the cold season. As we have seen, the Polynesian culture was diversified and advanced in many ways. Though much of the old culture has disappeared, important parts still exist. This is what we are going to see next week. Then we are going to Tahiti to visit a traditional dancing group and see how they train their dancing from the difficult beginning. That is in a week from now. Until then, we wish you a good week.
Voy a decir que no. Vamos a decir que no. Oh. Con la fuerza de mi voz. Vamos a decir que no. Oh. Yo lo canto sin temor. Vamos a decir que no. Oh. Todos juntos a triunfar. Vamos a decir que no. Por la vida y por la paz. Terminemos con la muerte. Es la oportunidad.